So now we're going to talk about that other method that I mentioned in an earlier video. So we're not going to do this one by trial and error. We're going to do this one by what's called the AC method. And generally, those are the two methods that I use. You might find some other things out there, but the AC method is kind of what it boils down to. Okay, so you might say, well, why is it called that? So this is for polynomials of second degree that are in this form. Ax squared plus bx plus c. So we have a leading coefficient that's not 1. And the AC comes from, we're going to take A times C. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. Here we have on example 11, we have 6x squared plus 13x plus 12. We're going to take 6 times 2, which is 12. And that's the AC part. Okay, that's why it's called the AC method. Now you'll notice there's not a 12 in the polynomial. That's true. So we come up with that 12. But the good thing about this method is now it goes back to what we did in the past. We need two numbers that multiply to be 12 now, okay? And we want them to add to be that middle number, 13, okay? So it kind of goes back to what we've done in the past. So two numbers that multiply to be 12. Could be 1 and 12, could be 2 and 6, could be 3 and 4. Which one adds to be 13? Well, this time it's that top one. So that adds to be 13. And so we're going to use 1 and 12. Now, before we start drawing parentheses, what we're going to do is we're going to split the 13x up into 1x and 12x. This is the AC method. Now, there are other versions of this, but this is the one where it has all the steps. It's going to show you everything. Goes back to things that we've already learned, so that's kind of why I like this method. Now, 1x plus 12x is 13x. The first term, the 6x squared, you're going to keep that. And the last term, the 2, you're going to keep that. So this term stays the same, this term stays the same. It's just that middle term is splitting up into 1 and 12. Now, 1x and 12x. Now you might say, well, why don't I split it 3x and 10x? We don't know how it's going to split up. That's why we did this part over here. That's the AC part where you figure out how it's going to split. And now what you're doing is you're unfoiling it. You know, you're going backwards through the steps of FOIL. So we split up those two terms, or the middle term, into two terms. Now, if you remember way back like in section 6.1, we had grouping. So we're going to go back to the grouping with a dotted line. All right. So you're going to pull out the greatest common factor, which for the first two terms, it's going to be x. And then when you look at the back two terms right here, it's going to be a 2. Now that addition sign, again, comes from right there. So it's plus 2. And then if I factor out a 2, I get 6x plus 1. Now, in order for your grouping to work, that parenthesis and that parenthesis, that has to be the same. But they are. Yay. And if you found the numbers, this is going to work, okay? So if it doesn't work, then you've made a mistake somewhere. Either you didn't find the right numbers or you didn't do the grouping right. But it works, so one factor is going to be 6x plus 1. That's the common factor. And then the other factor, it comes from this part and that part. So it's going to be x plus 2. You can always check it with FOIL. It's going to work. We'll go ahead and check it. Oops, there's another one. Okay, so 6x squared, if I do the foiling, I get the plus 12x plus 1x plus 2. That's FOIL. And then those two terms add up to the 13x, which is what we were going for, so it all checks. Okay, I like the AC method. It's all there. It's not guesswork. It's based on things that we've kind of already learned how to do. It's a little bit of writing, but you know, if you get used to it, it's not too bad. All right. So here we have another example. And I've got a 16 times a 12. So you might be thinking right off the bat, oh, I got to go 16 times 12 AC. Yeah, I don't want to do that. That's going to be some huge number, and I don't want to deal with, I don't want to deal with that unless I absolutely have to. But there's great news here. I've got a GCF. So I'm going to take out the greatest common factor first. Oops. And I think 4 will go into all those numbers. So I'm going to take out a 4, and that's going to give me 4x squared minus 8x plus 3. Now that's much more manageable. Those numbers are smaller, and I can work with those a little better. Let me double check and see if I multiplied right. So 16x squared, negative 32x, positive 12. Yeah, that all looks good. Okay, now where is the 4 going to go? It's just going to hang out front. Just gonna leave it out there, waiting. It's just waiting. It's part of the answer, but it's now what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to factor the trinomial inside. Okay. Now I am going to use the AC method, and I'm going to go 4 times 3. So I get my AC part is 12. So I want to multiply to be a 12, and I want to add to be a negative 8. So you can think about those numbers. Again, if you can't come up with the numbers, make a list. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. We know both numbers are going to be negative because I have a positive 3 and a negative 8. So I'm going to need them to both be negative. And it looks like it's going to be a negative 2 and a negative 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite I'm going to pull in, well, I don't have to do it right now, but eventually I'm going to put in some brackets, 4x squared. And then I'm going to make that negative 8x, I'm going to make it a negative 2x, and a negative 6x. So this split comes right there. And that's what we're trying to figure out with all that stuff I did in blue over here. Well, how does the negative 8 split up? Okay, and so it's the O and the I in FOIL. How does that split up? Okay, so we did it. That's the good news. And now we're going to have a grouping thing. So draw the dotted line. There it is. This is going to be so cool. Okay, so 4 bracket. Now I look right here. 4x squared minus 2x. What's the GCF? And it's going to be 2x. I factor that out, and I have 2x minus 1. So that, I don't know if that's happened before for us, but if the whole thing factors out, you're going to put a 1 there. You have to have that 1 there as a placeholder. Now just kind of check in your mind, is that 4x squared? Is that negative 2x? It is. Okay, so far so good. Now we're going to look at the back 2 terms. I am going to factor out a negative. Why? Because it's minus 6x. It goes by that third term, the one right after the dotted line. If that's a minus, you're factoring out a minus. So we're going to factor out a minus. And then what do 6 and 3 have in common? 3. And then if I factor out a negative 3 from negative 6x, I'm going to have 2x. And if I factor out a negative 3 from 3, I'm going to have negative 1. So think if that makes sense to you. Negative 6x there, and a negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. That's the tricky part for students sometimes. Okay. So it worked. Now, here's the really exciting thing. This parenthesis is the same as this one. And that has to happen in order for the grouping to work, but it happened. So yay, we got it. We're getting somewhere. Okay. So the 4 still stays out front. It's just hanging out front. And now I'm looking in the brackets. I'm going to have 1 parenthesis 2x minus 1. That's the common one. That's this one and this one. Those factor out. And then the other parenthesis is going to be 2x minus 3. And it comes from that piece and that piece. Okay? You can check it with FOIL and then distribute the 4 and see if it works, but it's going to work. So it's very exciting.